Happy Monday, my little Liberty kitty cats. And if you are listening right now, which you are no matter when you're listening, I suppose, but if you're listening when this show drops on Monday morning, it means you have just a few hours remaining to register for free to watch me, myself, your shining beacon of liberty, speak at Offshore Escape 2020, being put on by our good friend Mikkel Thorup over at Escape Artists. This is an amazing event where you can learn a lot more about how to have some financial diversity, the idea of becoming an expat, from all sorts of different experts that Mikkel has met and connected with over the years, including myself. I don't know how I'm an expert on anything, but I do give a talk about what I have learned over the years from interviewing hundreds and hundreds of freedom-loving individuals right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. So to hear my talk, to watch me speak live, my talk is actually on Thursday, June 4th at 11 a.m. I believe that's Eastern time. It's UTC -4 for those time zone nerds out there. But I do encourage you to head over to lionsofliberty.com/escape and get your free ticket right now. That's lionsofliberty.com/escape.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Claire.
All right, Liberty Kitty Cats, with me today, I've got a couple gentlemen from an awesome organization called Student Loan Tutor. I've got the co-founder and CEO, Zack Geist, as well as the director of the tutoring department, Michael Cundick. Gentlemen, are you ready to roar?
Always.
Awesome, guys. Zack, I'm going to start with you. Because I know a lot more about you, because I heard an amazing 2-hour interview that you did with our friend Mike Brancatelli from Psychedelic. I highly recommend checking that interview out. That was really, really in-depth and really fun interview. But this isn't about his show. This is about ours. So first, I want to get to know you a little bit better. Why don't you just tell everybody out there kind of, I guess, the non-2-hour version of kind of how you got started in this whole thing, kind of a little bit of your background, where you came from, and how you ended up founding Student Loan Tutor.
Great. That's a long journey. It's always interesting to try to abstract the right material for the audience that you imagine is listening. I grew up, my family came here from Russia. My mom was born in China, grew up in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, moved to the Bay Area of California. I ended up growing up kind of in the projects, really. I found out real early that I had somewhat of an edge due to some of my very early upbringing, and I became very familiar with, how difficult it is to be a crab getting out of a bucket without a roadmap. And I think that eventually led me through making lots of money and losing lots of money all the way until my early 30s, in which I decided that I wanted to do something that really helped a lot of people. And I tried to find, I guess it was an ambitious goal, try to find the biggest problem or one of the biggest problems and try to figure out a way to solve it. I think Elon Musk says, if you want to make a lot of money or be a success in life, find the biggest problem and that you could possibly solve and solve it. So I think I took that to heart, and I stumbled across student debt, and that's was the beginning of a journey that started with that. It actually started from, as bizarre as this sounds, from taking a root bark from Africa called Iboga while in Mexico, which is, I think you're in Mexico right now. So it actually began in Mexico.
You're giving me ideas.
So, yeah, it's a pretty wild beginning. And that's a very brief.
I can't let you get away with not going into a little bit more detail just on the Iboga ceremony first. What can you just describe? I mean, you could probably spend hours describing it, but could you describe, I guess, on the base level, like what exactly happened in the context of that ceremony that kind of pushed you down this path?
Great. Yeah, great question, Marc. I actually just went live with a podcast with a medicine woman that works with Iboga, has worked with a lot of famous people actually with the medicine. And I go deeply into detail of my Iboga experience in that and what led me to it. I guess maybe it's better to start with what led me to it. What led me to it was addiction. What led me to addiction was trauma, which I didn't really understand. I thought trauma was just people that went to war and then came back. But growing up in the projects is war. And so the journey of Iboga took me into basically like a lucid dream state where I was able to really expand what it meant to be a being. I guess it's a really broad view of what the Iboga experience was. It shattered my paradigm of what I thought was possible, what I thought the mind was, and what I thought my mission was as a human being, enwrapped in a soul. I didn't really know what that was, and Iboga gave me a glimpse of that and helped me feel really connected to the rest of humanity and a living planet and living, living ancestors, whatever that means. And even the entire experience, I was seeing mathematical calculus like type of equations as I was thinking. So, it was, I noticed that a lot of creativity and genius had come from whatever realm was temporarily opened by this Iboga. And I wish I could say that Student Loan Tutor was like revealed to me in some really beautiful way during the Iboga journey itself.
You must solve the student debt crisis.
Yeah, truth be told, I had just lost my company that I had made millions and lost it 3 times. And I had just lost my company, had tried to rebuild it from the ashes. And in order to do it, was taking small amounts of oxycodone to keep myself motivated to do it. And even with the help of that, I called it my limitless pill. I still wasn't able to because fate wouldn't have it. No matter how hard I tried with a Herculean effort, I could not muscle my way back into it. And it eventually led me to live in a tent in the wilderness on as little as I possibly could in Mount Shasta, which is a large drop from a 7-figure income to living in a tent in the wilderness, let me tell you. But I was white-knuckling addiction for a year where I just wasn't doing it, but it was taking every bit of my strength, You could picture maybe some people in AA that I just remember thinking, I associated AA with, and I never went to AA, not that it probably isn't helpful, but I see a lot of people, what appears to me to be white-knuckling it, smoking a lot of cigarettes, drinking a lot of coffee, and finding other ways to meet that. And I think I might have done it with workaholism. But Student Loan Tutor actually came right afterwards. I couldn't figure out what the hell to do for that full year. I tried a couple things and nothing felt quite right. And it was right after the journey I came upstairs and I was eating some breakfast. And there was a guy there that was brought by the person who brought me. I actually gave him Iboga because I'd bought it, but I was too terrified to take it myself. And he himself I think he's a libertarian actually. He owns a company that does $1 billion a year in revenue here in the United States. And he had flown a bunch of us out to Mexico. And one of the people he flew out was struggling with addiction. And he says, and I said, oh, what do you do? And he said, oh, I'm looking into this stuff with student loans. There's all these new programs that Obama, unraveled, and there's all these crazy things could happen, but he couldn't explain any of it. And that put me on a year-long path of a lot of people that couldn't quite understand how any of this shit worked. And that's how it began. And that was a little bit of that Iboga experience. I'm not sure if I answered or gave insight into that too well.
Well, yeah, I think you'd have to maybe go into 3 or 4 hours of detail to probably really, really describe it. But what I'll do is I'll link in the show notes for the show.
I shit myself. I'll tell you that. I shit myself on it. I threw up. And when I threw up, I was throwing up what I believed into an open human skull, and I was throwing up bugs and all of that. And the person, there was a purple gorilla holding.
He's gonna link the episode, all right?
Yeah.
He's gonna link the episode.
No, I like this stuff. Now I've got a good soundbite to get out
Hopefully you
there.
weren't eating while I said that.
Oh, that's good stuff. I will link to that podcast if you shoot it to me in today's show notes. Michael, what about you? Can you tell us a little bit about your path to sort of where you are now, how you ended up meeting up with Zack and getting involved in the student loan issue yourself?
Absolutely. I never expected to be seen as an authority on federal student loan repayment. I actually have had a huge passion for permaculture and community building and organizing for the last almost decade. And I had just come back from 6 months of apprenticeship at an off-grid permaculture farm here in southern Utah after getting certified. Permaculture is this a holistic design science about growing food and working in harmony with ecosystems and the living planet. And I came back to the city after having this beautiful off-grid, clean air, clean water, perfect experience with my new wife, and then we were stuck in concrete. And, I have an organization called the Utah Permaculture Collective, which I'm chairperson of, and we would be meeting and cultivating community around this study of permaculture. And I met Zack through that because he's, despite being a finance guy, he's actually very grounded in what we often call the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, kind of coined by Charles Eisenstein. So Zack was coming to those groups, and I've had kind of a background in sales. Like, I've done financial work before in different industries, and I'd kind of put that behind me, just focused on growing food and organizing around that. And he thought, here's a guy that clearly is well-spoken and passionate. And just like what Zack had found, he found something that was not just morally neutral, but actually on the side of the good guys. Like, we're helping lower and middle-class people get rid of the handicap that is inherently built into the system. We're removing those shackles and showing them, even though it is overly complex, just like taxes, where someone could go in and do their tax return. If you have a good write-off strategy and a corporate strategy, and you know what the wealthy people know, you end up paying very little, or you could pay a whole boatload if you don't know what you're doing. Student loans is the same thing. So I saw an ethical way to really help people, and it's really evolved over the last 3.5, 4 years. I now run a lot of the day-to-day for Student Loan Tutor and built up our consultation process. And I've actually been asked to run as the Green Party candidate for Salt Lake County mayor right now. So thanks to the freedom of being connected with such a great business and such a great company viewpoint in the world, it's freed me up to do lots of different things. So that's kind of how I landed with Zack, and we're both have a lot of fun together trying to make the world a more beautiful place.
So you said you were asked to run. Who exactly was it that asked you to run? Was this like a series of connections you had made in the area, and people just kind of said, hey, we need someone to run under our platform, so you seem like the guy? Well, how did that come about?
Yeah, I've been community organizing for the last 9 years. My first nonprofit was all about local agriculture and getting artists to support that, and very quickly found regenerative agriculture and permaculture, and I got involved in air quality activism here in Salt Lake and in Utah in general. We have horrid air quality. We get these really bad inversions in the wintertime, which is like looking out over Mordor, and just people are dying prematurely. It's awful. And so I've just been a big activist and organizer, and I'm also a musician. And so I've kind of built a little bit of a following, if you will. And the Green Party of Utah just said, gosh, like you embody our principles. Will you run? And then I said, okay, let's dive into this. So yeah, that's where I'm at today with it.
You never know, where your interests can lead you, even into politics.
You really don't know.
My podcasting journey has led me to some interesting places as well. But I want to dive into, like, a lot of people listening right now. I really want to address something kind of off the top, because there might be people listening that they might be thinking, all right, maybe I don't need to listen to this that deeply because I don't have student loans. Hopefully, they're really intrigued by both of your stories already, and the puking bugs and all that stuff. But I want to talk about this overall concept of debt and how we can apply some of the lessons that we'll talk about to sort of other areas in life, including like debt people might not even think about that they have in some ways. So I'm sure either of you can sort of take this on a little bit of a philosophical journey when it comes to this stuff. But I really want to just talk about a little bit of why this what we'll talk about today applies to more than just people who specifically have student loan debt. And either of you can take it away.
Zack's the key for the philosophy.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand what debt is, and maybe how resources were shared and exchanged in the past. We're so far removed from that that we forget that there wasn't always currency. What came first, debt or currency? What came first, credit or debt? And what debts? I mean, maybe the more simple question is, because that's multiple podcasts, just on what came first and where that came from and why, and then you got slavery in there somewhere, and it wasn't just African slaves; they're all over. Then the more you look at slavery, you start to go, well, wait a second, maybe there's still forms of slavery, and you start to go, well, what are forms of slavery? And then you start to ask yourself a question well, what do human beings need in order to exist as full human beings? Can a fish live in a tree? Can a human being live without, ground to plant things in? Can a human being live without leisure time? Can a human being live without socialization? Can a human being really live a full life without healing from past trauma and like having the time to be able to integrate that? Can a human being live without an adequate amount of sleep or nutrition or daylight or clean air? Like what do you know? And then you start to go, well, okay, maybe they do. Like, and then you start to question, what is a human being anyway? Like, are we, an accident happening on a rock somewhere that are trying to maximize our self-interest and hopefully live as much of the quote unquote good life, however we see it in an entirely subjective way, and then die and maybe throw a kid onto there somewhere if that was kind of what we thought was a good idea. Or did we come into this world with a purpose of some kind that if we look back on our lives, we could see that purpose seated in us, and in times where our gifts have shown, and then throughout time, maybe those gifts have fallen, and maybe those gifts, you haven't expressed them outwardly so much as they've been interests that you've had, and we've been put up into a world where our interests don't seem to align with our ability to survive and pay for those things that are required to be paid for in order to survive. Things like land, shelter, healthcare, leisure time, social life. These things that are, come with a price. And I guess I want to point to maybe animals, because that's a good example. Like, you think of a squirrel or a bird, it comes into this world that if it survives the hatching process, it now exists in a world that has air and trees and worms and stuff, and it goes through through its life being a bird. Whereas we come into this world and we need land because we can't fly except for in our dreams. At least most of us, or not me anyway. And the idea that we need to do something, we need to be able to somehow come up with this thing called money in order to buy the land that is already owned. We come into a world where all the land is already owned, and most of the time into families that are already working jobs that are very technocratic, very specific, and we don't even know quite what they do. It used to be we'd know what our father or our mother did, or our mother, would help with the household, or, maybe had interests, or our father, was in a trade that his father was in, and we began to learn that trade. I don't know. I was just kind of like plopped in the projects of Hayward and Oakland, trying to figure out how I'm going to support myself at a really young age. And I guess I did. I mean, I was a true capitalist. I would buy people's lunch coupons because my mom was too proud to really fill out for them. We totally qualified, but she's like, no, we're not getting those. Here's $5. You figure out how you're going to feed yourself for the day. And it was really a blessing in a way. But I found that I could buy a lunch coupon for, 75 cents or $1, even trade for it. And then I could buy lots of people's lunch coupons and then sell them to people that are trying to buy lunch. And then next thing you know, I've got a whole business going. So I guess
you were a hyper-capitalist as a youth.
Of course, I didn't know it because I was like 11 years old or 10 years old. But I was a hyper-capitalist, I guess. And I guess where we're at now is what is debt? And debt is more than just student debt. Student debt exists for the most part. I mean, I could speak about myself and probably a lot of other people, is that you feel like you're kind of a loser if you don't go to college, graduate with a degree. The bigger the degree, the better. If it's a doctor or a lawyer, the better, right? I mean, that's the idea. And then a lot of people will be like, shit, I don't know. These classes suck. I'm going to get a degree in anything because any degree is better than nothing. And then we, if we don't have rich parents, unless we're have a really good lunch coupon buying business when we're younger and we save up for college while we're in elementary and junior high, and we don't spend all our money on pot when we're in high school and a girlfriend or whatever, then we have to take on student debt, and we take on this debt at 7% interest, and we forbear it to the future, which just basically means we put it in.
Is that what people pay on average for student loan debt?
7%. Yeah, 7% on average. Wow. Imagine a mortgage at 7%.
That's wild.
Because the amount of student debt is if you have a graduate degree, oftentimes the amount of a mortgage, unless you live in one of the coastal states, in which case your rent or your mortgage is huge. And again, a mortgage is rent. And so a lot of people think, well, I don't have debt, and they say that because they don't have a mortgage. But, you have a mortgage if you're paying rent. You're in debt because you don't have land. Even when slaves were freed, the idea was they were supposed to be provided with some land and ability to live on said land and earn a livelihood of some way. And we don't have land now. I'm not proclaiming that I know exactly how to solve that. There are some great ideas around this, but we're all in debt. And I think it's important to understand that we're in debt. If we don't own our land outright and we don't grow our own food, we're renting food. That's considered rents. It used to be, at least 100 years ago, if you didn't produce your own food, your food were rent costs. That was part of a rent.
If you don't make it, you got to buy it. So that's
Yeah. That's a form of debt. So student debt is essentially debt in order to be able to learn a skill that you don't know, that you don't get taught from your family, so that you could be able to earn a livelihood. So you go into debt for your ability to be able to learn how to make money, to pay back that debt and other debts.
So that you can afford to go into other debt when you buy a house or land or what have you.
Yeah, and then there's you hear things now where there's good debt and bad debt. And really what debt is about is if you have, it's all about cash flow. So if you, it's great to own, to be millions of, how much in debt is Trump? He's billions of dollars in debt, but his cash flow is so great, and we deal with this entirely abstract concept that money has become totally disengaged from nature. And I think that maybe this COVID-19 economic crash, forced separation is maybe the beginning of an initiation into a potentially different way of working with money and trade and gift. And our currencies, we don't have to abolish money, but the actual way that currency functions can be changed. And it could be linked to the rest of the natural process. And it could be more fair without being, quote unquote, what people would consider communistic. And it could still allow people to grow wealth based on a new story of values that we have, Yeah.
I mean, there was a time where money simply represented something else, where money represented literal bars of gold, or maybe even it represented milk at some point, or eggs, or something concrete that you were just representing the exchange of. At this point, though, what money is in our current society can't be remotely related to what it was when it was just a simple medium of exchange. Now money is completely manipulated by governments, by non-government entities like the Federal Reserve, and we could do a whole 7 hours about that too.
Yeah, it's a dangerous slope to go down. Don't worry, I'm not going to go too deep down that. But it's interesting that you said it was based on something concrete, which is, somewhat of a secure, strong substance, at least in our day. A lot of us have never seen a bar of gold, but we've seen a bar of concrete. Right. There was a time where people saw bars of gold. And then we go, okay, well, it was based on gold. Money was, essentially represented as a certain value of gold or silver, right? But why was gold chosen as the backing? Why was gold the backing of money? And the idea with gold being the back of the money is that gold, as interesting as it is one of the only materials that doesn't go through an entropic process, meaning it doesn't decay and then provide new life. As a matter of fact, gold just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything unless you use it for dental work or for electronics or building jewelry with it. But it doesn't go through an entropic process that allows more life to grow from it. It's kind of dead, actually. And I think maybe the idea that money could be this permanent thing that continues to either stay the same or even worse, continue to grow, is part of the problem, is that it becomes fixed. And I think we're being invited into looking at, what in the hell are we doing with the stored wealth of humanity? Is it distributed in a way that is best for the planet? I'm not saying that we need to give equals to everybody and then, restart the game. I don't know if it's that simple. I think, honestly, if they did that, the money would just immediately go back in the same hands it's in. But that's because we're not looking at the fact that the idea of currency should maybe be based on something more like nature. How does that currency go through a decay? And there's a term for this called negative interest or demiurge, which essentially devalues money over time, forcing it to circulate. again, the reason that these stimulus checks have gone out and SBA loans and PPP loans is due to COVID, it has stopped the velocity of money. So it's stopped the circulation of it because people can't meet or do anything. So so here you go. And then the minute you stop the circulation of money, you've got pyramid schemes coming out under whatever new name that they are. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know where to stop talking in this part.
I'm the same way, Zach. I actually just did a podcast right before this one, and at some point during every answer, I'm like, am I still answering the original question? And then I just have to say, hey, stop me when you need to. I'm very ranty in a similar way, but this is good because I like ranty stuff, and I like to go down weird different alleyways that my listeners aren't necessarily used to hearing. These are really big topics and really big conversations, and these are the kind of ideas that I want people to start thinking about in a different way. Whether it's a right way or a wrong way isn't necessarily the point, but I think we've all grown up with having certain concepts shoved down our throat, and that kind of leads us right into the student debt crisis, because it's really like you kind of alluded to before. It's become something where it's all part of the package of this American dream, where what you do is you go to school, then you take out debt and go to college, and that's not going to be a problem because you're going to make enough money to pay it back. So don't even worry about that. Let's just shuffle that to the side. Then you're going to get a job for a company and put a lot of your money into a 401k because the stock market is the absolute best place to put your money, and we're going to give you some tax breaks so that works out. And we want you to save your money, though, because eventually you're going to need a down payment for a loan on the house so you can go into even more debt. And this cycle continues in every stage of our life if we just go along with what we're told to do, with what we're basically programmed to do from the beginning. Michael, I don't want to shut you out here. I'm curious if you have any kind of thoughts, if you want to kind of segue a little bit into the actual, like our current student loan crisis, if you could maybe give a little background on kind of maybe some of the steps that got people to where we are, like that got people to the point where there is such a massive amount of debt simply in these, what for many people now, especially millennials, are finding out are essentially worthless degrees.
Yeah. There's something like 1.7 trillion in total federal student loan debt, put across about 37 million borrowers. That might be off by...
That actually sounds small when you realize that Congress just spent like $3 million or $3 trillion in the scope of one bill. But it's really frightening that now sounds small, whereas last year it would be more shocking. But that just speaks to how much money just gets created out of nowhere.
That's a fair statement.
It's a law of relativity, though. So what we've got to be careful of, and what we watch, is when inflation happens, other things become very valuable. Like a lot of people are really focused on UBI. This stimulus looks a lot like universal basic income. What type of social dividend should Americans have for their participation in America that has become, whether you think it's a great country or not a great country, whatever country it is, it's become this country. What, based on its wealth, should people receive some type of dividend? Like, has anybody other than Jeff Bezos and the investors in Amazon contributed any way to the success of Amazon, for example, but on a larger scale of the country of America and of the United States? I can't say America because they're South America, Central America, as you know, because you're in one of them
Mexico,
now.
America.
Yeah, exactly. Wall or no wall, it's still there, part of the same continent. So the concept is, though, if UBI did get released, universal basic income, it would have to be fixed against something else. Otherwise, what we run into is real estate would then climb up to absorb the new money that's gone in there. Inflation essentially would just swallow it whole. And I think our currency system and our economic system needs to be based to protect that from happening, to protect mass amounts of accumulation from getting stuck and from not serving humanity and this planet. Because, it might serve some humans, but if it doesn't serve the planet as a whole, then we end up in the mess we're in. But I just totally hijacked the conversation from...
No, you're great. Another relevance number to try to ground that is, I think it'd be 1 in 10 Americans have an average of about $30,000 in federal student loan debt. So 1 in 10 people are carrying that weight. And it's fascinating because it's one of the only areas where our federal government is actually truly profitable. They're making a ton of money off of this 1.7 trillion accruing at 6-7% average interest rate. And one of the things that people, some have kind of heard this when they get burned on it, but basically they've made it nearly impossible to have your federal loans discharged in the normal bankruptcy process, which is not fair and really kind of unconstitutional if you want to kind of get down to how that's worked out. And so it's interesting though because it comes with a really bright side of things where almost everyone I run into with federal student loans is either avoiding their loans to great detriment. Interest is getting piled on and compounding, and every time they look, it's bigger and scarier.
I know people that had 6-figure debt that just gave up at some point because they said, I can't keep up with this. I may as well just give up because I'm never going to catch up to it. So why pay any of it? So I'm just going to let it go. And, I guess they will face, I don't know. I don't even know what the consequences will be.
I really hope we can reach some of those people because it doesn't matter. You could have $2 million in federal student loan debt. And if you know how these income-driven repayment and loan forgiveness laws actually function, it'll clear up your credit issues. You'll be able to buy homes again and not have to be feared of garnishment or taxes being garnished. There's all kinds of consequences that come from this when most of your friends that you're talking about would probably be able to scoot into a $0 a month payment, get back on track, fix their credit just by navigating this strange system. So what I was trying to say is even though you can't discharge them in bankruptcy, the mechanism that creates that are called these income-driven repayment plans that have been around now for 25 plus years. And still, people are just slammed with not knowing the right information, or they had a bad experience when they called on their loans one time, or their weird uncle told them that loan forgiveness is for millennials looking for handouts, or some weird disconnect happened, and they don't know the federal laws that protect them from ever having a payment that is uncomfortable. Like, if you're not at a $0 payment, it's going to be minuscule, even if you have a fairly sizable income, based on knowing how to navigate the laws. And that's where we specialize. I wish I could just condense it down to a meme or two and just solve the problem. But it takes a little bit of time to navigate. But the bottom line is we have solved this federal student loan problem for consumers, and it's critical information.
So is the crux of the matter here that in terms of solving this crisis at the sort of person-to-person level, that on the one hand, we're pushed, these loans are pushed upon us. We're all told, whether it's culturally, directly through the government, just what our parents passed down, that we all got to go to college, so we all got to get these loans, but don't worry, they're backed by the government. They really advertise that part very, very heavily. But it sounds like what they don't advertise is the other end of it, the sort of all the little secret rules and things that you can use to make your situation better. But you never hear about that part. I mean, the fact that I'm sure there are many people listening right now that have been in debt for years that don't even know that there are these sort of other ways around things. So is that part of the design of the system in a sense? I mean, do you think there's a nefarious design in a way that we put these loopholes in or these ways for people to get out of it? But why, if we have them there, why don't people know about them to the extent that you have to start a whole business to help people navigate the system?
You want to take that, Zach?
I do, because my answer is going to be surprising to you. I actually think, and I wouldn't have answered it the same way maybe 5 years ago. I actually think we're actually dealing with the causes of the best intentions. There's a saying about the road to hell being paved with them. But I believe that the idea is that after World War II, every American had the right to go to college, and there were grants, and if they couldn't qualify for grants, they would get student loans. And everybody had the right. It doesn't matter about your credit, your background. Every American citizen could, have the American dream of getting an education, getting whatever job they want. And then that began this whole you must do it. I'm entitled to it. And then that turned into other schools, for-profit schools, coming in and saying, well, we have all this federal money that anybody could qualify for. All we got to do is sell people on why they should be a, vet tech, or nothing against vet techs. We need vet techs, but whatever, profession that is. And, I remember seeing these things as a child on television. And all of a sudden, it was completely disassociated from any level of accountability. And I'm not saying accountability from, people that grow up in inner cities or people that grow up in, rural areas that take on this debt, but accountability of these schools that are run by, CEOs and investors and I mean, Trump University. I mean, there's things that get called school, they qualify for federal funding, and yet they don't have any, they're not linked with the student in their ability to actually earn the income to pay back the debt. So it's kind of like, I remember a South Park cartoon once where it was about underwear gnomes, and it was like, steal underwear, that's step 1, step 2, and step 3 is profit. And they never get to quite what step 2 is. And so the idea is that every American...
There's something missing in the equation here.
And I think it's beautiful. I think, it's beautiful if you have a really successful, financially successful country. Granted, it's built on the backs of a lot of people that may not, should they have some type of social dividend. But, at least enough to survive. And not be worried about survival needs. Because I could say a lot of the real stress that comes and violence and crime comes from survival needs. But... I'm trying to loop this back in. Somehow.
I want to step in a little bit, Zach.
Step in, Michael.
The cost of schooling has gone up double compared to the regular rate of inflation. And the schools are kind of in this catch-22 where they're attracting students and saying, oh, we have this level of success of our students afterwards. They don't want to admit that they're giving loans that are far in excess of the likelihood of the income potential of their students. And so they're not, their narrative is just like preventing them from having a professional assistance with the loan. So the schools take no accountability. They don't teach people about loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment at all. And then on the federal government side, the laws really are complicated. Like the first form of this came out in the mid-90s. There's now 6 different loan forgiveness style plans that you can choose from. And it's not, the federal servicers themselves are generally, 12 to 14 an hour employees with no background in finance. They're reading stuff off a screen. They can't handle
managing 47 million borrowers.
Yeah.
Managing 47 million
borrowers.
Yeah.
And they're not trained enough to give, and when you have the difference in someone's output where they might pay, less than what they owe a long time from now, or they're going to pay double at huge monthly payments, like it's an insane amount of money at risk, and people are putting their hands in untrained staff, and it's really frustrating.
Hey there, kitty cats. I need to take a quick time out here to tell you about another awesome Libertarian podcast. This is our good friends, Nate and Charlie, over at Good Morning Liberty. These son of a guns, they do this thing 5 days a week, and they absolutely kill it. These guys are both musicians, and they both actually own a business working in the healthcare IT industry. So they've seen a lot of what goes on in a highly intervened in market like healthcare. So they have a lot of great insights, and they really do a bang-up job talking about current events and really speaking to a lot of the news that's in the headlines and filtering it all through the ideas of liberty and kind of shutting down socialist solutions that come up. So you can find more by subscribing on all your favorite podcast app. Wherever you listen to this one, you can you can definitely find Good Morning Liberty, or you can check out their website, BernieLies.com. What a great name. Head over to BernieLies.com or search for Good Morning Liberty. You are not going to regret subscribing to this awesome show. I just want to follow up on one thing you said, Michael, real quick, is that, pertaining to the cost of school and how you said it's doubled. Like, what do you think, from your perspective, contributes to that cost increasing so much? Because it can't be just the cost of the facilities, the cost of the teachers, or maybe it can be, but...
It is. It's the for-profit schools competing. I don't mean to hijack this again from you, Michael. It's the for-profit schools are essentially... driving up the bar. So they will say, we have this cool, just think of Arizona, for example. You're essentially marketing to 18-year-olds. What attracts an 18-year-old to want to go to your school? If they can get into Harvard and Yale, great. But outside of that, it's like, what is the most cool, dorm rooms? What is the most cool event auditorium? What is the most cool
Where's the best party
football
school?
Arena? Where's the best party school, right? So
which I've always thought, I partied in college quite a bit, but ever since I left college and worked professionally, and I met people that did what I do, that some of which have degrees, some of which didn't, I started to think, man, I could have just probably moved to that town and partied without paying all that money.
Yeah.
And if you know that your all of your students coming in can get huge amounts of federal student loans, basically infinite amount of graduate loans if you're going for a graduate degree, then it's really easy to want to up the price of your school when you know that will for sure get funded regardless of someone's credit history too.
And I think that's part of the crux of the pricing problem there, because, you know, these schools can raise their prices all they want and promote themselves as giving value all they want, but at the end of the day, if people don't have money for it, they're going to be mitigated in how much people, and their price will be mitigated naturally in an actual market where people were limited in what they can pay. But when you have the federal government basically just saying, writing this checks for however big they are, there's really no constraint, like you said, on what they can charge.
Yeah, and you got to remember that just like a competitive market, like a competitive job market or a competitive dating market, the schools are in a competitive market for the students. And if they don't have the best campuses and the latest cutting edge theater and all of that shit, then you're going to be struggling to have students, and you're not going to have full attendance. So they're put in a kind of a double bind situation where they're actually struggling oftentimes financially because they're continuously improving the facilities in order to essentially market to 18-year-olds.
To justify their prices for whatever. You know, if you're going to have a really expensive tuition, you have to be able to say, you have to be offering more than an education, because everybody's offering that. You got to be offering, whether it's a nice campus, an awesome football team, your connections, or whatever that may be. They have to add in all this extra marketing in order to justify it.
Totally. And some of those things cost a lot of money. And the schools are like, you know, I don't know, like I think of like, they make them cool, you know, and sometimes that there's a expensive price tag to the veneer of making something look really cool. And it creates a competitive environment for the schools, which then charges them to have higher tuitions. And again, I guess maybe the more challenging thing is why in the hell does somebody have to listen to Lions of Liberty podcast in order to get some insight on how to repay their student debt in a way that makes sense, that doesn't lead to a life of, you know, kind of peonage or indentured servitude in some way, or at least the feeling of that.
Why isn't this part of the package from the upfront? You know, here's what loan you can get, and here's all the ways you can, you know, mitigate what you pay. I mean, that they only give you half of it, it seems.
Because the buyer would beware if they're told, hey, this is the average amount of people. This is what you're really going to make after you graduate. Right. This is what the average person makes. This is what your life's really going to look like.
Because to tell them about all the ways to get out of it and all the ways to navigate things, you have to first admit that you're going to be saddled with a bunch of debt and you're going to have trouble getting out of it in the first place.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think that 18-year-olds don't want to swallow that pill. And they essentially haven't had to. They end up having to swallow the pill later, which sucks, you know, like, you know, they say, oh, millennials, you know, I'm from Generation X, right on the borderline of millennial. I'm 40. And, you know, it's, you know, they say, oh, millennials, you know, they're lazy or whatever. Well, you know, I don't know, maybe that's, you know, partially built into all of what's going on. But a lot of it's the fact that the cheese has moved, the opportunity to be able to own a home unless you work for Facebook or Google or can become a doctor. You can't go get a blue collar job without going to school oftentimes these days and be able to afford a home and like raise a family. Like it's just virtually impossible. You end up, you know, having to move to Mexico or something in order to be able to do that well.
Do something crazy like that. One thing I want to dovetail into as you're talking about sort of how a lot of colleges have to upgrade their campuses and provide these amazing facilities. How do you see what's going on now with the coronavirus response, just the general fear that is embracing much of the populace with this stuff, and the fact that these universities are now allowing the ability to take these classes from home, do your work from home, do everything remotely. How much is this going to affect a lot of these universities' ability to market themselves with great facilities if people actually are starting to maybe realize, maybe for not a great reason, a great circumstance anyway, that they don't really need facilities to learn? Do you think this what's going on, this crisis, or the response to the crisis, however you want to look at it, is going to change this equation at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've actually been surprised that more and more people aren't seeing that as it is. I think that the reason that people go to school mostly these days is to appease their parents and you know, unless they're actually going after a degree that's very job specific, like becoming a doctor, plumber, heating and air conditioning, veterinarian, you know, like I need to get a degree in order to get this license, you know, law, to be able to practice. And so for those people that are going after these licenses, if they could do that remotely, which internet, you know, learning has already taken off, But I think this is going to be a huge catalyst to move in that direction. And education, frankly, should be more affordable. Like, why in the hell do you have to go into $250,000 of debt to become a chiropractor? I could hear like chiropractic schools like not wanting me ever to speak there after saying that. But I think that they're in the same boat of competing with other schools. You have to compete, so you have to continuously increase your resources. But I think that, I consider myself an autodidact, and I would, invite others to maybe really look into that, what that means. The meaning of that is essentially I like to self-teach based on what I'm interested in. And I'm blessed with the ability to be able to have the impetus to be able to turn that into a livelihood, and maybe some teaching around how to earn a livelihood doing what it is that we enjoy doing. It doesn't have to be that we do everything we enjoy at all moments of time. I'm singing this perfect thing at all times, and that's what I do. A lot of times, life comes with some things we don't enjoy, mixed with some things we really, really enjoy. And being able to not be so, boxed in, not so specialized, where all I know how to do is work on, people get very specific in their skill set because they're able to charge more the more specificity they have. Long roundabout way of saying, shit, I don't know what the hell is going to happen with education after COVID. But I know that there's people. I live on me and my fiance just bought an 86-acre property on the coast of Hawaii. And there's these,
and it looks amazing. You sent me an awesome video of it. It looks absolutely spectacular.
It's like a slice of heaven, and it took some real miracle to have that happen. Growing up in the projects, I never quite even had that on my vision board, So there you go. But there's a couple here, and she's about to go to grad school, and she thought she was going to move back to the what they call the mainland. And she's going, well, maybe I'll stay in Hawaii, and I maybe could go to school from here and go to a school that's on the mainland. And maybe that's what we're moving towards, is where maybe even people in other countries could go to school wherever they want to go, as opposed to being limited to like this is the classroom size. And then there could be more tutors as opposed to professors just lecturing, and then we could even ask questions of like, what is it that society really needs right now, like. What I'm in desperate need of right now is farmers. We have 86 acres here, and there's, one single crop growing, which is lychee. Thankfully it sells for like, $8 a pound on Honolulu, in Honolulu and on Oahu. But like what I'd really love to do is really build beauty, is to be led by beauty, to be led by living a life that is, aesthetically pleasing. In all of its sensory, in all of its sensory and intellectual forms, and I think maybe that's the type of education that people could begin to seek out. And I think that maybe a lot of people have had this quarantine serve them in that way and have uncovered some of their loves. Now, granted, some people have just tried to mask their traumas the minute they stop working. That's like all that shit surfaces. Thank God this happened for me now, as opposed to 10 years ago. Because it would have been a very different experience, and I empathize with the people in that situation deeply.
Oh yeah, I'm very grateful in many ways. I of course wish there was no such thing as COVID or no such thing as government lockdowns and everything, but I live in the world where it is, and I'm pretty grateful that I am in the place mentally, really, more than anything else, that I am in life now, where instead of just being depressed over the situation, I'm taking action, and I'm doing things to improve myself, and I'm not just sitting around waiting for things to change, because I think that's going to be a really long wait. But we're getting off topic, but that's the nature of things, as we discussed. One thing I want to talk about a little bit more before we wind down here is really want to get into like some actionable steps that people can take, maybe even if they're not. Maybe if they just have like a small amount of debt of some kind, like just little things that maybe you guys could touch on that people might not even think of. Obviously, we want people that really need help to actually come to you guys and and check out what you guys are doing at Student Loan Tutor. But are there just some little things, that everyday things that people don't think of, that they could do like tonight if they're listening right now, and maybe they have that $30,000 in debt? What are just like little actions people can take to start themselves down a path of getting themselves out of this crisis, instead of just continually looking outside for solutions?
I'd love for Michael to talk about the specifics of it, but the philosophical piece is to really deal with the shame that surrounds being in debt and not having been able to pay it. A lot of people just don't look at their debt because they're just like, I'm just going to work my ass off, nose to the grindstone, pull myself up by my proverbial bootstraps, and somehow pay this fucking thing off at some point. And I use that very loud language because, that's kind of the aggressiveness that we have with ourselves, or we're taught to have with ourselves, and to not really be gentle with ourselves. And because maybe it's looking like it's, an excuse. So I guess really work on the shame element of like understanding that you were brought into a world where everything's kind of owned already. And, that's just the way it is. Bitching about it and all that's not going to help too much, but, feel that, and then feel okay with trying to find a solution, because oftentimes there is a solution to student loan debt. Our phones should be blowing up off the hook at all times. We should have a line across state line for people to get help with student debt. If people are logical and rational, it makes complete financial sense in every way to call us and get help with your student debt, and also to call and get help with taxes, and also to call and get help with a lot of things. But the reason people don't seek therapy, that they don't seek marriage counseling, is due to shame generally. So deal with the shame piece. But on the actual practical side, Michael, what can they do?
I'll try to make it as brief as possible. Unfortunately, it is kind of overly complex, but the element here is you want your loans to get on track for forgiveness. So everybody that has direct loans right now has been put in, because of the CARES Act, they've been put into a temporary suspension of interest and payments for the next 6 months. That should give people a big clue that their debt is not nearly so concrete or terrible as it might first appear. Anybody who's been going down this road needs to be aware of the income-driven repayment plans that are available to them, and to enroll immediately, especially during this kind of unsettling times. You might have income disruption, whatever. It doesn't matter what happened on your last year's taxes, for instance, when you're talking to them about documenting income or household size. And it is stressful, right? It's really stressful to fill out government paperwork and wonder if you put the right box in, and all these other things. The Department of Education ultimately is this kind of debt is actually fairly benevolent, and it's really, really favorable. It's the best kind of debt you'll ever have. Some tips on this are: make sure you have direct loans. If you don't have them, often it's a good move to consolidate all of your non-direct loans and have direct loans. And then of all the different... But not always. If you have older loan types and you've been on a course for 5-10 years, it might not be advisable. It gets complicated. But if you're a more recent graduate, you probably already have all direct loans. In which case, what plan do you want to go into? Don't trust the box that says, put me in the best plan, because it won't put you in the best plan. You want revised pay-as-you-earn, REPAYE. 90% of my clients are there. Again, there are exceptions to these rules, but if I'm just trying to help someone that has 30,000 or less, this isn't like the worst mountain on their back, but it is disruptive. You don't want to be paying $300, $400, $500 a month towards this. That's multiple nice cars, or a good down, a good payment towards the property you want to move into someday. Get that debt out of your life. Move to a $0 payment scenario. And if you're self-employed, if you have variance in your pay stubs, if you're nomadic at all, you do lots of different things, you really should be at a $0 payment for as long as those things are true. If you're making $250,000 a year as a vet somewhere, you're probably going to have above a $0 payment. But the fact of it is, even those people probably have really enormous graduate loans and need this. So it's hard for me to boil it down super concretely. But if you have a small amount of debt, check if you have direct loans, get yourself into revised pay-as-you-earn. If you call the servicer and they're saying that everything you just heard me say doesn't sound true to them, it's probably because they were hired yesterday and they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. If you have the experience and time for this, you can call your servicer 5 different times and ask the same question and get 5 different answers, unfortunately. It's really, really pretty messy. But you also should know that you don't have to show your federal tax return to document income. If you had a great year last year in taxes, but now business is faltering, or you're in between jobs because of the crisis, there's something called alternative income documentation, and you should know how they both work so that you can always have the lowest payment. It gets weird, and I really advise, if you have over $50,000 in federal loans, it's kind of like now you've got a difficult tax situation, and you'd probably consult a CPA or find someone that's good at taxes, and you should probably get a professional in federal student loans. And most companies that are out there that even do anything similar to us are like weird, huge call call center operations that don't have that personal touch and don't actually care and don't have the reputation that we do. So maybe it's unusual that you'd find us through Lions of Liberty at this point, but it's an unusual world we live in, and sometimes you get handed that life preserver and it just makes things really crystal clear, and you get that support. So if what I'm saying sounds complicated at all, we just charge a $50 deposit to have an hour-long consultation and build a life of loan strategy that will forever remove the burden of your federal student loan debt. I can say that with full confidence.
Well, I can tell you that our audience is very largely leaning towards the millennial demographic, and maybe the higher end being around my and Zach's age, around 40. So I think just by the numbers alone, there's got to be a decent number of people listening who are affected by this in one way or another.
And these ones, younger borrowers are starting to hear more that there's income-driven repayment plans and there's some options out there for them. But most people's experience is they come out of school, they don't have much income, the $0 payment comes easily if they even find the right plan to go into. But then a couple years later, they throw a big year on their taxes and their payment goes through the roof and they have no idea how to navigate that. And it's just like, it's so nice to know what the rules are from the get-go and have a life of loan strategy in place so that it's just never an issue for you.
We also do a fully holistic planning. I mean, we have an enrolled IRS agent. That doesn't mean he works for the IRS. It means he has the highest designation you can have at the IRS. And he works with us, and he works 100% on the gift, meaning that he'll give tax strategy advice, what type of corporations you need to form, what type of receipts you need to keep, what's a write-off, what's not, how to structure your life in that way. And you could pay him whatever you feel that value is. And he saves people, tens of thousands of dollars a year all the time doing that. So we look at this problem of being in debt as a holistic problem. I mean, it's not just student debt. You have to pay taxes as well. I wish I could solve the real estate problem. I lucked into 86 acres, but for a lot of people, that's a big challenge to get in there without burying yourself and having no money left over at the end of the month. So yeah, when I solve that, I'll be back on this show and I'll tell you.
Awesome. Well, Zack, Michael, two of the things I really try to do with the show the most are to get people thinking about concepts in different ways, and sort of that things, even within the sort of libertarian bubble, which we have to some extent. I like to get people thinking about, a lot of the different concepts, whether it's money, whether it's debt, et cetera, in different ways than they're used to thinking about. And I like to present people through my guests with solutions, actual real world things they can do in life to fix their situation or help their situation. And I think we were able to accomplish both here today. So I thank you both for coming on and sharing your thoughts and sharing what you guys are doing at Student Loan Tutor. So just before I let you guys go, I wanted to give you one more chance to plug Student Loan Tutor, let people know exactly how they can reach out to you guys if they have any more questions or want to look into this further. And also feel free to plug away on anything else you got going on. Michael, if you want to talk about give a little plug to your mayoral campaign, feel free to do that, or plug away on anything you guys got.
Well, when it comes to student loans, just look up www.studentloantutor.com and you'll have our number there quick and call. And we do help a lot of self-employed physicians, and so our website is geared that way, but that's just a specialty. It's like we can help anybody with federal student loans. It just takes more nuance when someone's self-employed. So pretty easy to find us, call and get the help, and I think you'll really enjoy the experience. We've made the whole thing just like illuminating and fun and right to the point, get you prepared, and once you hand off the reins, the problem solved, and we actually do paperwork on behalf of our clients. So it's becomes a whole different experience. We like to say we're the next best thing to not having student loans in the first place. As far as just the vision that I think we're sharing about like the future of debt and the more beautiful world that's in our hearts. Like I'm under Michael the Mayor in Service to Life is the page that I run here on Facebook, and michaelthemayor.com, and it's just about really bringing government transparency, bringing ecological priorities back into play, bringing our communities back together, using opportunities like COVID-19 to bring our neighbors back into communication with one another. And, I really believe there should be a neighborhood center within walking distance of every neighborhood where people can have mutual aid and learn gardening and share tools and share resources and even share best practices about finance, whether it's getting screwed on student loans or getting screwed on taxes or whatever else. We need to start opening up and being more transparent. And this is a really important time as we're shifting with COVID-19 and with this pause in society. We can finally get to the bottom of some of these things that have been really huge monkeys on our backs. So definitely encourage people to get connected and make a difference wherever they may be, and to start talking about their traumas, whether it's financial or anything else. Let's try to find some dialogue and some healing in all of this.
Zack, feel free to plug away as well.
Yeah, you could engage more with the different ideas that I probably touched on briefly here on Zeitgeist with Zack Geist. That's the podcast, Zeitgeist with Zack Geist.
You almost had to use that word with your name.
I had to. It was totally appropriate and totally unintentional with the name. And then also, we've got some cool things coming up with the land here. We have 86 acres, private road, private waterfalls, pools, ocean front.
See, that's something libertarians are going to love, the private road. If there's one way to get libertarians on your side, it's to talk about the private roads.
Private road, hydroelectric power, so we're completely off grid. We have river water that's run through filters coming from the tallest mountain on Earth if you measure from the base, Mauna Kea. As well as rainwater catchment. So we're able to catch rain here in Hawaii, which is cool because some places it's illegal to catch rain. And so, we're starting the Rainbow Bridge Sanctuary, where we bring people together to talk more about different ideas like we've talked about here, retreat center, as well as farm. And then I guess kind of what I wanted to touch on is if any of your listeners we've been looking for years now for an attorney that kind of fits into the, this mindset. Maybe they're not super experienced, but they graduated and they have, the ability, they're barred and, and they want to help out with student debt, and they want to help out with debt and bankruptcy and just help our clients. We're always looking for someone with the right heart, and that's been really difficult to find in the legal profession. It's almost like an initiation out of soul. In my experience, I'm sure there's some beautiful attorneys, but I have struggled for a long time to try to find that. And a lot of that might be economic. You got $250,000 of debt. It's going to be really hard to take a job that your heart feels is right, because it might not pay what you think you should earn struggling through that whole process. But yeah, if you're an attorney and what we do interests you, then feel free to reach out on our Facebook at Student Loan Tutor.
Well, Zack, Michael, thank you so much. And I think as with just about any crisis, whether it's COVID or what have you, or whether it's a student debt crisis, at the end of the day, the only way to get out of it is by empowering people with the ways that they can help themselves out of it, or by helping each other out of it. It's not going to come from some great leader from above just pointing to a solution and it happening. So I'm really proud to have you guys on to talk about the way you guys are playing your own part in that. So thank you so much, guys. Keep up the great work. Keep on roaring.
Thank you, Marc.
All right, kitty cats, I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Zack Geist and Michael Cundick of Student Loan Tutor. These guys are doing an awesome thing out there. They're finding a free market solution to helping people to solve the student debt crisis by helping individuals navigate the system and solve the problem on their own without calling for giant bailouts or anything like that. So I know you guys have heard throughout the show today probably a few things here and there that you might have thought, oh, that I don't agree with what Zack's saying there about, I don't know, debt or what have you, or something about money and or land use or land ownership or anything like that. But Zack specifically, I'm only getting to know Michael today. Zack I've heard on a bunch of shows. I've listened to his podcast, and he is a really interesting guy that takes the really concepts and brings them in a different direction. And I know a lot of what he's saying is definitely outside what is normally heard in the libertarian sphere. Zack's not a libertarian as far as I know per se, but he definitely has some overlap. And regardless of what you think of some of their views in other areas, these are two guys who in this situation are definitely using capitalism to solve a problem, and I think they're doing a hell of a job. So I do want to encourage everyone to check out Student Loan Tutor, really, because I think you can learn a lot just by what these guys are doing. If you know anyone that is in student debt, or if you yourself have student debt, they can really help you fix this problem on your own, because there are ways to do so. So I think that's an amazing service. Really enjoyed talking to both of these guys, and I really enjoy getting a little bit outside the bubble now and again. So I think we were able to accomplish all of that here today. I also want to tell you about a couple other things going on. I just appeared on a couple shows recently. recently I was with Pete Quinones on his show Free Man Beyond the Wall on Friday, talking about my little escape from Los Angeles, California, and my current hideaway here in Mexico and some of what I've observed here. So I had a blast doing that. I also just did an episode with our good friend Remzo Martinez on his new program, On the Run, which airs on the We Are Libertarians network. So check that out as well. Talked about a lot of similar topics there, and always a good time with Remzo. And I also want to remind you guys, if you want to support this show, well, you can do so in many ways. You can do so just by subscribing, by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, wherever it is you listen, by sharing the show. These are all free ways to join. If you want something more than a free way, don't forget you can, of course, subscribe, become a member of the Lions of Liberty Pride on Patreon over at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty, where you will get all sorts of bonus content for as little as $2 a month. You can access our secret Facebook group and a lot of the live streams that we do in there. $5 and up, you get access to all of our exclusive audio content, and it just gets better and better the higher you go. You get free merchandise. At $25 a month, you get to join our monthly Mufasa calls, that is. At $50 a month, you get to be a Nittany level supporter and produce one of our shows like Tyler Colford did on last week's Felony Friday, where John interviewed Lynn Ulbrich for the second time. A heck of an interview. Got to go back and listen to that one. But there are so many ways to support, so many ways to join the Pride. You can also donate over at lionsofliberty.com/donate. We have a ton of links there to donate via cryptocurrencies, as well as you can also donate on PayPal at paypal.me/lionsofliberty. So there's no shortage of ways to send us money if you're the kind of person that would like to do that and help us grow the show and help us expand what we're doing. I'm doing a lot more content than usual now that I'm on furlough from my regular person job and down here in Mexico just podcasting away. So if you'd like to support us in this effort, in this mission, again, please do check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. Especially on the Patreon, we are giving 10% of our earnings over to our friends at DonorSee, where they are helping people affected around the world by coronavirus, by the lockdowns. They're calling for an end to lockdowns across the world, specifically in third world and poor countries where lockdowns are literally starving people to death. So I'm sure that's a message we can all get behind here. You can find out more about the projects they're working on over at donorsee.com/coronavirus. But 10% of all of our Patreon earnings every month right now is going to DonorSee to help them with that fight. So I encourage you to, if not support us, at least go check out the causes they're supporting, especially over at donorsee.com/coronavirus. Pick a cause you like, send a couple bucks yourself, because a couple US dollars literally do go a long way to helping people in a lot of these countries. That's all I've got this week, my friends. Well, that's not really all I've got this week, because you're probably going to be getting some extra content here this week. I have a couple interviews lined up this week. I'm bringing back Michael Cheney to talk about all his research into coronavirus. I've got an interview scheduled with Vin Armani. I'm also supposed to be speaking with Dr. Joe Jorgensen this week. So I have a lot on my agenda. I will not necessarily be holding everything to the normal Monday schedule. I'll be trying to get a little more content out to you guys now that I am settled here south of the border for a while. With that being said, I don't want you to forget there are other shows here on Lions of Liberty. It's not just me. You got Brian McWilliams every single Wednesday smacking you upside the head with his weekly shot of comedy, culture, and liberty on Electric Libertyland, while John Odie Odermatt wraps things up with his amazingly inspiring, hard-hitting look at the broken criminal justice system every single Friday on Felony Friday. Until next time, my friends,
Live long and live free.